My husband came home at 3 in the morning with sweet cologne. He said he was working late, but I checked his phone while he slept. I found texts to his secretary. My wife is too boring. You make me feel alive. If you are watching this video, don't forget to like, share, and comment where you're watching from. I want to see how far my story of betrayal has traveled. I woke to the sound of the front door clicking shut. The red numbers on the clock read 3:17 a.m. The mattress dipped as my husband Blake slid under the covers, and that's when the scent hit me. Sweet, floral, expensive. Not mine. I don't wear perfume like that. The smell wrapped around him, filling the space between us as he settled onto his pillow with his back turned to me. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I could make out his silhouette, his breathing already evening out like nothing was wrong. I touched his shoulder. "Where were you?" My voice came out hoarse, still thick with sleep. He didn't flinch, didn't turn to face me. "Working late?" he said, the words flat and mechanical. "Big presentation tomorrow." That was it. No elaboration, no explanation. Just those two words delivered in a tone that made my stomach drop. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Like he was reading from a script he'd memorized but didn't quite believe. I stared at the ceiling, my heart slamming against my ribs. Blake's breathing deepened beside me, slow and steady, like he'd already forgotten I was there. But I couldn't sleep. The perfume clung to the air, to the sheets, to my thoughts. I kept replaying his tone, flat, distant, rehearsed. My mind spun through a dozen explanations, each one more desperate than the last. Maybe a coworker hugged him. Maybe someone spilled something at the office. Maybe I was imagining things. But the knot in my chest didn't loosen. An hour passed. Maybe more. I lay there in the dark, listening to him breathe, feeling like a stranger in my own bed. How could he sleep so soundly? How could he come home smelling like another woman and just drift off like nothing was wrong? Unless this wasn't new. Unless he'd been doing it so long that lying had become as natural as breathing. The thought made my skin crawl. That's when I saw it. His iPad on the nightstand, screen still faintly glowing. He always forgot to lock it. I stared at the device for a full minute, my heart hammering. I didn't want to look. Looking meant acknowledging that something was wrong, that my marriage might be built on lies. But the perfume was still there, lingering in the air, and I couldn't ignore what my gut was screaming at me anymore. I reached for the iPad. My hands trembled as I picked it up, the screen brightening at my touch. His Messages app was open. He'd been texting before bed and never closed it. The most recent thread sat at the top, Sienna Cross. I didn't recognize the name. My thumb hovered over it, and every instinct told me to stop, to put it down, to go back to sleep and pretend everything was fine. But I couldn't. I tapped the thread, and messages loaded. Pages and pages of them, going back over a year. Photos of hotel rooms, late-night voice memos. Pet names that made my stomach turn. I scrolled up, my hands shaking, and that's when I found it. Blake's words from 2 nights ago, typed in that casual way he texted everyone. "My wife is too boring. She doesn't get me anymore. You make me feel alive." I stopped breathing, read it again, and again, too boring, like I was furniture he'd outgrown. Like 7 years of marriage, of building a life together, of trying to be enough, meant nothing. I wasn't angry yet. I was numb, frozen, trying to process how the man sleeping beside me could reduce me to this. A problem he tolerated. An inconvenience. Someone too boring to love. I kept scrolling, unable to stop. Blake complaining about me. How I made the same breakfast every Sunday. How I liked routines. How I was so predictable. Sienna's responses were worse. Laughing emojis. How do you deal with that? You deserve better, babe. They were mocking me, making jokes about my life, my habits, the woman I was. And Blake fed into every cruel word. In one message, Sienna called me the roommate. Blake sent back a winky face and said, "She has no clue. Too busy organizing the pantry." They both thought it was hilarious. I sat there in the darkness, the iPad glowing in my shaking hands, feeling something inside me crack, and then immediately harden into something cold and sharp. My husband had been living a double life for over a year. He'd been with his secretary, spending our money on hotels and dinners and gifts I'd never seen, while I made him breakfast and believed every lie, and he thought I was too boring to notice. But I noticed. And now that I knew, everything was about to change. I pressed the button. The screen lit up, and there it was. His Messages app, open, unlocked, waiting. My heart hammered so hard, I thought it might crack a rib. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the iPad cold in my lap, and opened the thread at the top. Sienna Cross. I didn't recognize the name. My finger hovered over it for a second, and then I tapped. The messages loaded, pages and pages of them. I scrolled up, my stomach sinking with every swipe. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This went back over a year. The first thing I saw was a photo. A hotel room, rumpled white sheets, champagne glasses on the nightstand, late afternoon light filtering through half-drawn curtains. Then another. Sienna in a black dress, smiling at the camera, Blake's hand visible at the edge of the frame. Voice memos I didn't have the courage to play. Texts with timestamps from late at night, early mornings, lunch breaks. Pet names. Baby, gorgeous. Can't wait to see you. My vision blurred. But I kept scrolling. I had to see it all. I had to know. And then I found it. A text from 2 nights ago. Blake's words, typed out in that casual, careless way he texted everyone. My wife is too boring. She doesn't get me anymore. You make me feel alive. I stared at the screen, read it again, and again. Each time the words hit harder. Too boring, like I was some kind of furniture he'd outgrown. Like I was the problem. Like everything I'd given him, 7 years of my life, my trust, my love, meant nothing. I couldn't stop reading. I scrolled back through months of messages, watching the affair unfold in real time. They talked about me, not in anger, not in guilt, in mockery. Blake complained about my routines, how I made the same breakfast every Sunday, how I folded laundry a certain way, how I liked things predictable. Sienna laughed. She sent back laughing emojis, called me so basic, asked how he could stand it. And Blake? He agreed. He fed into it. He made me the punchline of their private joke. One text stood out. Sienna had written, "Does the roommate know you're with me?" The roommate? That's what she called me. Not your wife? Not even Veronica. Just the roommate. And Blake didn't correct her. He sent back a winky face and said, "She has no clue. Too busy organizing the pantry." They both thought it was hilarious. I wasn't a person to them. I was a caricature. A boring, oblivious woman who didn't deserve honesty or respect. My hands started shaking so violently I almost dropped the iPad. I gripped it tighter, my knuckles white, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The room felt too small. The air felt too thick. I wanted to scream, to throw the iPad across the room, to call Blake and demand answers. But I couldn't move. I just sat there, scrolling, reading, absorbing every cruel word like poison seeping into my bloodstream. I kept going. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it would get better. Maybe I thought I'd find some proof that he still cared, that this was just a phase, that he regretted it. But it only got worse. There were texts about hotel rooms they'd booked, restaurants they'd tried, weekend trips they'd taken, while I thought he was at conferences. There were messages where Blake complained about having to come home to me, where he said he wished he could just leave, where Sienna encouraged him to do what makes you happy. I reached a message from 6 months ago. Blake had sent Sienna a photo of me. I was sitting on the couch in sweatpants, no makeup, reading a book. The caption read, "This is my life now. Send help." Sienna replied, "You deserve better, babe." I stared at that photo, at myself, completely unaware I was being photographed, completely unaware I was being ridiculed. My throat tightened, my eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I just kept scrolling, kept reading, kept letting the truth carve itself into my bones. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours. Time didn't make sense anymore. Eventually, I stopped scrolling. I just stared at the screen, at the last message. Blake had sent Sienna that morning after he left for work. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You're incredible." My hands went still. The shaking stopped. Something inside me fractured. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like ice cracking under pressure. I felt it split, felt something old and soft give way to something new and hard. Boring. He called me boring, and somehow that hurt worse than the cheating. The affair I could maybe have understood. Passion, temptation, weakness. But this dismissal, this contempt, this casual cruelty, He didn't just betray me. He erased me. He turned me into a joke, a burden, a problem to be solved. And the worst part, I hadn't seen it coming. I'd been so busy trying to be a good wife that I never noticed I'd become invisible. I kept scrolling. My fingers moved on autopilot, numb and mechanical, swiping through message after message. I wasn't even processing them anymore, just watching words blur past until a new name caught my eye. Mine. They were talking about me again, but this time it wasn't mockery. This time, the tone was different. Calculated, strategic. Blake had written, "I think I can get her to quit her job. She's been stressed about deadlines anyway." Sienna's response came immediately. "Why do you want her to quit?" Blake's reply made my blood run cold. "Makes the divorce easier. If she has no income, I pay less. My lawyer says it's all about her earning potential at the time of filing." I read it 3 times. 4. 5. Each time, the meaning sharpened like a blade. This wasn't about reducing my stress. This wasn't about wanting me to relax. This was a trap. I scrolled further back, tracing the timeline. 6 months ago, Blake had started the campaign. Little comments at dinner. "You work too hard." 5th, "We don't need the money." Suggestions that I take a break, scale back my freelance editing clients, focus on myself. I thought he was being supportive. I thought he was worried about me. He'd even brought me spa brochures, told me I deserved to rest. Every word had been bait. Every gesture had been part of the setup. Blake's message to Sienna from 3 months ago confirmed it. Once she quits, I can file. No income equals less alimony. My lawyer confirmed it. She just has to think it's her idea. Sienna had sent back a string of heart emojis and written, "You're so smart, babe. She won't even see it coming." My breath stopped. My chest felt like someone had reached inside and crushed my lungs. This wasn't just an affair. This was premeditated. This was fraud. He'd been planning to divorce me and manipulate the settlement so he could walk away clean while I scrambled to rebuild everything from nothing. I set the iPad down carefully, like it might explode. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from shock. It was rage. Cold, sharp, crystallizing rage. Blake hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He'd been systematically dismantling my financial independence, setting me up to fail, all while pretending to care. And I'd almost fallen for it. I'd almost quit. 2 weeks ago, I'd told Delia I was thinking about taking a break. Blake's smile when I mentioned it had been so warm, so encouraging. Now I knew why. I grabbed my laptop and opened our joint bank account. My login still worked. He hadn't changed it. The dashboard loaded, showing our checking and savings. At first glance, everything looked normal, but I started clicking through transaction histories, scrolling back month by month. That's when I saw them. Small withdrawals, $1,500 on a Tuesday in March, $3,000 on a Friday in June, $2,000 in August, always different amounts, always spaced out just enough not to trigger suspicion. I opened a spreadsheet and started tracking every irregular withdrawal over the past year. My fingers flew across the keyboard, adding, categorizing, timestamping, hotels, restaurants I'd never been to, cash withdrawals with no explanation, a charge to a jewelry store for $2,800. I'd never received jewelry from Blake, not for my birthday, not for our anniversary, not ever. My stomach twisted as the total climbed higher and higher on the screen. $40,000. $40,000. Stolen from our joint account, siphoned off slowly and deliberately so I wouldn't notice. Money I'd contributed to. Money I'd earned from late nights editing manuscripts and proofreading technical documents. Money that was supposed to be ours, for emergencies, for the future, for the life we were building together. He'd taken it and spent it on her. On hotel rooms and champagne and a diamond bracelet I'd never seen. He'd robbed me to fund his affair. I stared at the number on my screen until my vision blurred. Every dinner I thought we couldn't afford. Every time I'd hesitated before buying something for myself because we were saving for a down payment. Every conversation about budgets and being responsible. He'd been lying the entire time. He'd been spending our money, my money, on another woman, and then coming home to lecture me about fiscal responsibility. The hypocrisy was suffocating. Something cold and sharp settled in my chest. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't even anger. It was clarity. Blake had looked at me, his wife, his partner, the woman who'd stood beside him for 7 years and seen an obstacle, a problem to be managed, a mark to be conned. He'd calculated exactly how to strip me of my independence, steal from me and discard me, all while making me believe he cared. He thought I was too boring, too trusting, too stupid to notice. He didn't just cheat on me, he robbed me. And he thought I was too boring to notice, but he was wrong. I noticed, and now that I knew, everything was about to change. I sat frozen at my laptop, staring at the spreadsheet of stolen money, the iPad beside me still glowing with Blake's messages to Sienna. My body felt numb, disconnected, like I was watching myself from across the room. But then something clicked. My mind sharpened, snapping into focus with a clarity I'd never felt before. I knew exactly what I had to do. This wasn't the time to fall apart. This was the time to act. I picked up the iPad and started taking screenshots. Every single text message between Blake and Sienna. Every photo, every voice memo timestamp, every mention of me, every discussion of his divorce strategy. My thumb moved methodically, capturing frame after frame. I worked backwards through the timeline, making sure I didn't miss anything. Hotel reservations, restaurant receipts embedded in their conversations, his messages about his lawyer's advice, Sienna calling me the roommate, all of it. Every piece of evidence that proved what he'd done. I opened my laptop and logged into Google Drive, then Dropbox, then iCloud. I uploaded the screenshots to all three, organizing them into folders by date and category. Affair evidence, financial theft, divorce planning. I wasn't taking any chances. If Blake somehow deleted everything from his iPad, if his devices mysteriously crashed, if he tried to cover his tracks, it wouldn't matter. The evidence would still exist, floating somewhere in the cloud, permanent and untouchable, far beyond his reach. I opened my personal email, the one Blake didn't have the password to, and sent myself copies of everything. I changed the subject lines to things only I would understand. Q1 tax documents, insurance info, mortgage statements. They looked boring, administrative, forgettable. No one would think to open them. But inside each email were attachments that could destroy him. I added timestamps to the file names, organized them chronologically, and made sure every backup was complete. My hands were shaking, but I kept going. I picked up my phone and dialed Delia. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" Her voice was bright, casual. I opened my mouth to speak, and nothing came out. I tried again. "Delia." My voice cracked. "I need you." There was a pause, then her tone shifted immediately. "What happened? Are you okay?" I told her. Everything. The perfume, the texts, the year-long affair, the stolen money, the divorce trap. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was silent for 3 full seconds, then Delia exploded. "I'm going to kill him." "I'm serious, Veronica. I'm coming over right now, and we're going to his office, and I'm going to destroy him in front of everyone." Her voice was shaking with fury, and I could hear her grabbing her keys. But I stopped her. "Delia, wait." She went quiet. "Don't. Not yet." My voice sounded strange, too calm, too controlled, almost foreign to my own ears. "I need to be smart about this." "Smart about what?" Delia demanded. "He's been cheating on you for a year. He stole $40,000. He was going to divorce you and leave you with nothing. What's there to think about?" I took a breath. "Everything. I need to think about everything. If I confront him now, he'll get defensive. He'll delete evidence. He'll spin the story. I need to have all my pieces in place first. I need leverage." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Delia spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost awed. "Okay, what do you need me to do?" I told her to sit tight. I'd call her when I was ready. After we hung up, I opened a new browser window and started researching. Divorce lawyers in our area. I made a list of the 5 highest-rated ones specializing in infidelity cases. Workplace misconduct policies. I pulled up Blake's company handbook and read through the ethics section, taking notes on fraternization rules and reporting procedures. Financial fraud statutes. I wanted to know if what Blake did qualified as theft under state law. I bookmarked everything, saved PDFs, compiled resources. I created a new folder on my laptop desktop. I named it Household Finances, Bland, innocuous, the kind of thing Blake would never bother opening. Inside, I created subfolders: bank records, legal research, communications, timeline. I transferred all my screenshots, all my documentation, all my evidence into that folder. I backed up the entire folder to an external hard drive and hid it in the back of my closet, inside a box of old tax returns Blake had never once looked at. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. The mirror reflected someone I barely recognized. My face looked thinner, harder, like the softness had been carved away. My eyes were different, not sad, not broken, but focused, determined. I looked at that woman in the mirror and realized she'd been there all along, buried under years of trying to be accommodating, trying to keep the peace, trying to be enough. Blake thought I was too boring to fight back. He had no idea what boring really looked like, because boring women didn't just survive. They planned, they calculated, they won. Camden Rourke's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. Delia had recommended him, said he was the best divorce attorney in the city, the kind of lawyer who didn't lose. I sat in the waiting room, a leather binder in my lap, feeling strangely calm. When his assistant called my name, I stood and followed her down a hallway lined with framed degrees and certificates. Camden was older than I expected, maybe mid-50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that assessed me the moment I walked in. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Mrs. Hale, Delia spoke highly of you. Tell me what's going on." I didn't waste time with preamble. I opened the binder and slid it across the desk. Inside were printed screenshots, organized chronologically in plastic sleeves. Text messages between Blake and Sienna. Bank statements with highlighted withdrawals. A timeline I'd created showing the affair's progression alongside the financial theft. Camden picked up the binder and started flipping through it, his expression neutral at first. Then his eyebrows rose. He read one page, then another, going back to double-check a detail. After 5 minutes, he looked up at me. "This is airtight. He's done." I nodded. I need to make sure he can't manipulate the settlement. He was planning to claim I was financially dependent on him, but I kept my freelance work. I have tax returns proving consistent income. Camden leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "With evidence like this, you won't just protect yourself, you'll own him. Infidelity, financial misconduct, premeditated fraud. Any judge will see this for what it is." He closed the binder and tapped it with one finger. "But I have to ask, are you prepared for how ugly this could get? Because once we file, there's no going back." I met his eyes. "I'm prepared." Camden nodded slowly, and I saw something shift in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Good. Let me draw up the paperwork. In the meantime, do not confront him. Do not let him know you're aware of any of this. The element of surprise is your greatest asset." I thanked him, took back the binder, and left his office feeling lighter than I had in days. I had a lawyer. I had a strategy. I had ammunition. Now I needed more. Iris Valdez came recommended through Camden's office. She was a private investigator who specialized in infidelity cases, and when I called her, she agreed to meet me that same afternoon. We sat in a coffee shop 2 blocks from Camden's office, and I explained what I needed. I have texts proving the affair, but I need photographic evidence. Dates, times, locations. Something concrete that can't be disputed. Iris pulled out a notepad and started taking notes. "Do you know their patterns? Where they meet?" I gave her everything. Blake's, work schedule, the hotels mentioned in his texts, Sienna's address. Iris nodded, already strategizing. "I'll have something for you within a week." She had it in 3 days. Iris called me on a Tuesday morning and asked me to meet her at the same coffee shop. She handed me a manila envelope across the table, her expression professionally neutral. I opened it. Inside were surveillance photos, time-stamped, high-resolution, damning. Blake and Sienna leaving a hotel together, his hand on her lower back. Blake kissing her in a parking garage, her arms around his neck. Sienna laughing at something he said, his arm draped over her shoulders. Every photo was a nail in his coffin. I stared at them, feeling nothing. No pain, no surprise, just cold, clinical satisfaction. That night, while Blake was in the shower, I sat at my laptop and pulled up his company's employee handbook. I'd found it weeks ago during my research, buried on the internal portal he'd left logged in on the home computer. I navigated to the section on workplace conduct and started reading. There it was. Clear as day. Romantic or sexual relationships between supervisors and subordinates are strictly prohibited due to inherent power imbalances and potential conflicts of interest. Violations may result in disciplinary action up to and including termination. Blake was Sienna's direct supervisor. He'd been violating company policy for over a year. I opened a new document and started drafting an email. I kept it anonymous, professional, carefully worded. No emotion, no accusations, just concerns backed by specific details. I mentioned the policy violation, suggested witnesses who might have observed inappropriate behavior, included vague references to rumors circulating among staff. I didn't attach evidence, not yet. That would come later if needed. For now, I just needed to plant the seed, to get HR's attention, to start the wheels turning. I saved the draft and closed my laptop. Delia came over that evening after Blake left for a late meeting, which I now knew meant he was with Sienna. We sat on the couch with wine, and I showed her everything. The photos, the binder, the draft email. She went quiet, studying each piece of evidence with a mixture of awe and fury. When she finished, she looked at me. 5. Are you sure about this? I mean, the divorce. Yes, absolutely. But his job? You're going to destroy his career. She wasn't judging, just making sure I understood the weight of what I was about to do. I took a sip of wine and set the glass down carefully. He tried to destroy me first. He stole my money, tried to manipulate me into quitting my job, planned to leave me with nothing. He didn't just cheat. He strategized how to ruin me financially and emotionally. I looked at Delia, and I knew my voice sounded different, colder, harder. I'm just finishing what he started. He made the choice. Now he gets to live with the consequences. Delia nodded slowly, then raised her glass. Then let's make sure he never forgets it. I sent the email at 2 a.m. from a burner account I'd created specifically for this purpose. The address was generic, untraceable, nothing that could be connected back to me. I'd used a VPN, cleared my browser history, taken every precaution. The subject line was simple and professional: workplace ethics concern, Blake Hale and Sienna Cross. I kept the body of the email factual, dispassionate, the tone of someone genuinely concerned about company policy rather than someone with a personal vendetta. I included no attachments, no overt accusations, just enough detail to trigger an investigation. The email mentioned observed behaviors, extended private meetings behind closed doors, inappropriate familiarity in public settings, suspicious calendar overlaps. I referenced Felix Brennan as someone who might have relevant information, though I phrased it carefully, may have witnessed, to avoid putting words in his mouth. I cited the specific section of the employee handbook prohibiting supervisor-subordinate relationships. I closed with a request for confidentiality and a hope that the company would take appropriate action to maintain professional standards. Then I hit send and watched the email disappear into the void. By 9 o'clock that morning, Margot Sinclair had forwarded it to Harrison Vance. I knew because Blake's calendar, which synced to the home computer, suddenly showed an urgent meeting added for the following day. HR discussion. M. Sinclair, H. Vance, B. Hale. I stared at the notification, feeling something electric run through my chest. It was happening. The machine I'd set in motion was already moving, grinding forward with its own momentum, and there was no stopping it now. Blake came home that evening completely different from the night before. The whistling was gone. His shoulders were tight, his jaw clenched, his eyes darting to his phone every 30 seconds. He barely acknowledged me when he walked in, just dropped his briefcase and went straight to the kitchen to pour himself a drink. Scotch, neat, something he only did when he was stressed. I followed him in, keeping my expression concerned. Long day? He downed half the glass in one swallow. You have no idea. I moved closer, touched his arm gently. What's wrong? Did something happen at work? He pulled away, running his hand through his hair. It's nothing. Just office politics. Stupid bureaucratic bullshit. But his hand was shaking slightly when he refilled his glass, and he kept glancing at his phone like he was waiting for bad news. I pressed a little more, playing the worried wife perfectly. Blake, you're scaring me. What's going on? He turned on me then, his voice sharp. Just drop it, okay? It's work stress. Nothing you'd understand. The words stung, not because they hurt, but because they were so predictable. Even now, even when his world was starting to crumble, he couldn't help dismissing me. I let my face fall, let him see the flicker of hurt I knew he expected. I'm sorry. I'm just worried about you. He sighed, the anger deflating as quickly as it had come. I know. I'm sorry, it's been a rough day. He reached out and squeezed my shoulder, a gesture meant to be reassuring, but that felt mechanical. I'll be fine, just need to get through tomorrow. That night, I lay awake again while Blake tossed and turned beside me. He couldn't sleep. I could feel the tension radiating off him, could hear him checking his phone in the dark. Around 3 a.m, I heard him typing. Probably texting Sienna, probably spiraling, probably trying to figure out what had gone wrong. I stayed perfectly still, breathing evenly, pretending to be asleep. Inside, I was wide awake, every nerve alive with anticipation. Tomorrow, Blake would walk into that meeting, and he had no idea what was waiting for him. Morning came. I got up before Blake and made coffee, the same routine we'd had for 7 years. He came downstairs at 7:15, already dressed, his tie slightly crooked. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. I poured him coffee in his favorite mug, added cream the way he liked it, handed it to him without a word. He took it, barely looking at me. Thanks. His voice was flat, distant. He checked his phone again. The HR meeting was in 2 hours. I watched him drink his coffee, watched him scroll through his emails, watched the anxiety tighten his shoulders. When he stood to leave, I walked him to the door. He grabbed his briefcase, patted his pockets for his keys, and I stepped close to kiss him goodbye. My lips touched his cheek, the same gesture I'd done thousands of times, now completely hollow. Good luck today, I said softly. He nodded, distracted. Yeah, thanks. He opened the door and walked to his car, his gait stiff and hurried. I stood in the doorway and watched him drive away. The morning sun was just breaking over the rooftops, casting long shadows across the street. Blake's car disappeared around the corner, heading toward his office, toward Margot and Harrison and a conversation that would change everything. I poured him coffee that morning, kissed him goodbye, and watched him walk into the fire I'd started. He called me boring, but boring women pay attention, and we never, ever forget. Blake came home at 2 p.m. I heard his car in the driveway, the engine cutting off abruptly, and I knew immediately something had happened. It was a Tuesday. He never came home early on Tuesdays. I was at my laptop, working on an editing project, when the front door opened. He walked in without calling out to me, his footsteps heavy and uneven. When I looked up, his face was ashen, drained of color, and his hands were trembling as he set his briefcase down. He looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. I closed my laptop and stood, arranging my expression into concern. Blake, what are you doing home? Are you sick? He didn't answer right away. He just stood there in the hallway, staring at nothing, his jaw working like he was trying to form words but couldn't find them. Finally, he shook his head. There's been a misunderstanding at work. His voice was tight, strangled. Someone made accusations. HR put me on suspension while they investigate. I let my eyes widen, let my hand go to my mouth. Suspension? What kind of accusations? He waved me off, pacing toward the kitchen. It's nothing. Someone's trying to cause trouble, lying about me. He grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water, his hand shaking so badly some of it sloshed over the rim. I followed him, keeping my voice gentle, worried. Blake, you're scaring me. What did they say? He downed the water in 3 gulps and slammed the glass on the counter. I said, it's nothing, Veronica. Just drop it. But he couldn't drop it. His phone buzzed in his pocket and he yanked it out, his face tightening as he read the screen. The phone kept buzzing, over and over, text after text. I could see his jaw clench with each notification, could see the panic building behind his eyes. He typed a response, fast and angry, his thumbs flying over the screen. Then another buzz, another text. He cursed under his breath, and I caught a glimpse of the name at the top of his messages before he turned away, Sienna. She was panicking. I could tell from the way his face shifted, from anger to fear to something closer to desperation. Whatever was happening, it was happening to both of them. I found out later that day, through a casual text from Delia, who'd heard from a mutual friend, that Sienna had also been suspended. The investigation had swept both of them up at once, and Tessa Wolfe, Sienna's roommate, had apparently told HR exactly what she'd witnessed over the past year. Tessa had warned Sienna this would end badly, had told her to break it off before it blew up in her face, Now Tessa was covering herself, confirming everything HR needed to know. Sienna's panic wasn't just about getting caught. It was about realizing she had no allies left. Blake's texts to Sienna that night, ones I read later when he left his phone on the bathroom counter, devolved into blame and recrimination. You should have been more careful. This is your fault for being so obvious. If you'd just kept your mouth shut, none of this would be happening. The affair was imploding in real time, and I watched it happen from the sidelines, saying nothing, doing nothing, just letting the fire consume everything it touched. Blake thought he could control the narrative. He thought he could manipulate his way out. He had no idea how thoroughly he'd already lost. Camden called me the next afternoon. I was in the bedroom with the door closed when my phone rang. Veronica, I thought you'd want to know. Blake and Sienna Cross have both been terminated. HR completed their investigation this morning. My breath caught. Already? Camden's voice was calm, professional. They found evidence of misused company resources. Hotel bookings charged to corporate cards, personal expenses disguised as business costs. Combined with the ethics violation and witness testimony, the company moved fast to avoid liability. Harrison Vance signed off personally. I sat down on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to my ear, feeling something bloom in my chest. Not quite joy. It was darker than that. Sharper, colder. Satisfaction, vindication. Blake had built his career on being the golden boy, the reliable one, the man everyone trusted. And now it was gone. Erased in a single meeting because he couldn't keep his hands to himself and couldn't resist stealing from the company to fund his affair. He destroyed himself. I'd just helped things along. Blake came home that evening, Wednesday, 24 hours after his suspension, and told me through gritted teeth that he'd been fired. He framed it as a witch hunt, a miscarriage of justice, HR overreacting to baseless rumors. He didn't mention Sienna. He didn't mention the corporate card charges or the witness statements or the policy violations. He just ranted about how unfair it was, how he'd given that company years of his life, how they'd stabbed him in the back. I listened, nodded, made sympathetic noises. Inside, I counted the hours until I could finally stop pretending. He lost his job on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, he still hadn't figured out it was me. He thought it was bad luck, office politics, a vendetta from someone jealous of his success. It never occurred to him that the boring wife he dismissed and betrayed had orchestrated the whole thing, that she'd been 3 steps ahead the entire time. That while he was busy underestimating her, she'd been systematically dismantling his life. They say karma is patient, but I wasn't. I became karma. It took Blake 3 more days to turn on me. 3 days of him spiraling, drinking too much, slamming doors, checking his phone obsessively for job leads that weren't coming. On Saturday morning, he finally snapped. I was making coffee when he stormed into the kitchen, his face twisted with something between rage and desperation. "This was you, wasn't it?" His voice was loud, accusatory, shaking. "You did this. You went to my company. You sabotaged me." I turned slowly, coffee pot in hand, and met his eyes. My voice came out calm, almost curious. Why would I do that? He faltered. The question hung in the air between us, and I watched him struggle to answer it. Because he didn't know. He had no idea I'd found the texts, seen the bank statements, discovered everything. In his mind, I was still the oblivious wife, the woman too boring to notice or care what he did. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. I don't know, because you're upset about something. Because you want attention. His words were weak, grasping. He didn't even believe them himself. I set the coffee pot down carefully. My hands were steady. "Blake, I want a divorce." The color drained from his face like someone had opened a valve. He took a step back, his mouth opening in shock. "What? Veronica, where is this coming from? We can work through whatever." I cut him off. "I want a divorce. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be served with papers next week." My voice didn't waver. It was the calmest I'd sounded in weeks, and I think that's what scared him most. Blake's panic shifted into desperation. He moved toward me, hands raised in a placating gesture. Okay. Let's just talk about this. You're upset about me losing my job. I get it. But that's not a reason to throw away 7 years of marriage. We can fix this." He was trying to manage me, manipulate me, the same way he'd done for months when he was pressuring me to quit my job. His voice took on that soothing, patronizing tone I'd heard 100 times. "You're overreacting. Fifth, you're stressed. Let's just take a breath and figure this out together." I walked past him to the dining table, where I'd left a folder that morning. It was thin, unassuming, the kind of folder you'd use for household bills or tax documents. I picked it up and handed it to him. "You should read this first." Blake took it, confusion flickering across his face. He opened it. Inside were printouts, pages and pages of them. Screenshots of his texts to Sienna, highlighted bank statements showing every stolen dollar, the timeline I'd created, the surveillance photos Iris had taken. Everything. I watched him read, watched his eyes scan the first page, then widen, watched him flip to the second page, the third, his hands starting to shake, watched realization hit him like a freight train. The knowledge that I knew, that I'd known for weeks, that I'd been planning this whole time. His face went white, then red, then white again. His breathing got shallow. He looked up at me. And for the first time since I'd met him 7 years ago, Blake looked genuinely afraid. "Veronica," his voice cracked, "how long have you—" I didn't let him finish. "You called me boring." My voice was soft, almost gentle, and that made it worse somehow. "You told Sienna I was too boring to get you anymore, that I was dull, uninteresting, someone to tolerate, not love." I took a step closer, and he actually flinched. But I was paying attention the whole time, Blake. "While you were stealing from me, while you were planning to manipulate me into quitting my job so you could control the divorce settlement, while you were laughing about me with your secretary, I was paying attention. And I was taking notes." Blake tried to speak. His mouth opened and closed, words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I'm sorry. God, Veronica, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. It was a mistake. I'll end it. I'll fix everything. Please. We can go to counseling. We can start over. I'll do whatever you want." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. His apologies meant nothing. They were just more manipulation, more attempts to control the situation, to make me back down. But I was done backing down. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No love, no anger, not even pity. Just a cold, empty finality. "You spent a year making me feel small, making me doubt myself, stealing from me, planning to leave me with nothing." My voice was steady, clinical. "I spent 3 weeks making you disappear. Your job is gone. Your reputation is ruined. Your affair is over. And soon, your marriage will be too." Blake's face crumpled. He tried to speak again, to apologize, to explain, but I was already turning away. I walked to the bedroom, packed a bag with enough clothes for a few days, and called Delia to tell her I was coming over. Blake followed me, still talking, still pleading, his voice rising in pitch. But I didn't respond. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just zipped my bag, picked it up, and walked past him like he wasn't there. At the front door, I paused and looked back one last time. He was standing in the hallway, the folder still clutched in his hand, his face destroyed. And that's when he finally understood he'd lost. Not just the argument, not just the marriage, everything. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of the house that was now entirely mine, signing the final divorce papers. Camden had done exactly what he promised. Blake settled within 3 weeks to avoid public court proceedings. The evidence was too damaging, the case too airtight. He agreed to everything. I kept the house, recovered the full $40,000 he'd stolen, and walked away with a settlement that reflected 7 years of marriage to a man who tried to destroy me. Blake's signature on the agreement was shaky, defeated. Mine was steady. Camden had called it the strongest case he'd seen in 15 years of practice. Blake's lawyer had taken one look at the binder, the surveillance photos, the bank records, and advised immediate settlement. There was no defense, no spin that would work. Blake had stolen from me, violated company policy, and systematically planned to defraud me in divorce proceedings. Any judge would have crucified him in open court, and Blake knew it. So he settled quietly, quickly, and disappeared from my life as thoroughly as I disappeared his career. My freelance editing business was thriving. I'd never quit, never let Blake manipulate me into financial dependence, and now I was busier than ever. New clients found me through referrals, My rates had increased, and I'd taken on 2 major publishing contracts that would keep me occupied through the end of the year, the work Blake had dismissed as unimportant. The career he'd tried to sabotage had become my lifeline. It turned out that being boring and methodical made me an excellent editor. Clients appreciated my attention to detail, my reliability, my precision. The qualities Blake hated were the ones that saved me. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Blake was working at a smaller firm across town. Nothing prestigious, nothing like the position he'd held before. His reputation in the industry was damaged. Word had gotten around about why he'd been terminated, and no one wanted to hire someone who'd misused company resources and violated ethics policies. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was just another middle-aged man who'd made catastrophically bad decisions and was living with the consequences. I felt nothing when I heard. Not satisfaction, not pity. Just indifference. Sienna had moved out of state, according to Tessa, who'd reached out to apologize for not speaking up sooner. Sienna's career in our city was over. No company would touch her after the scandal. She'd relocated somewhere in the Midwest, taken a lower-level position, and from what Tessa said, she'd learned nothing from the experience. She still blamed everyone but herself. Blake blamed her. She blamed him. They'd torn each other apart in the end, exactly the way people like that always do. I didn't follow up. I didn't care where either of them ended up. They were footnotes in a story I'd already closed. Delia and I met for coffee on a Saturday morning, the same cafe we'd been going to for years. We sat by the window, lattes in hand, and she looked at me with something like wonder. I can't believe how far you've come. 6 months ago, you were devastated. Now look at you. I smiled. It felt natural, genuine, not forced the way it had been when I was pretending everything was fine. I survived. That's what matters. Delia laughed, shaking her head. You didn't just survive. You dismantled him, piece by piece. I'm still kind of in awe. She got quiet for a moment, then asked the question I knew was coming. Do you have any regrets about any of it? I considered it, really considered it. I thought about the wife I'd been, trusting, accommodating, willing to give Blake every benefit of the doubt. I thought about the woman I'd become. Harder, colder, someone capable of calculated revenge. I thought about the marriage I'd lost and the life I'd gained. Finally, I shook my head. I regret trusting him. I regret not seeing it sooner. But destroying him? No, I don't regret that for a second. Delia raised her coffee cup. To not being boring. I clinked my cup against hers and smiled. To being underestimated. Because that's what I'd been, wasn't it? Underestimated. Blake had looked at me and seen someone too soft, too predictable, too boring to be a threat. He'd assumed I'd never notice, never fight back, never have the spine to burn his world down. He'd been wrong, and by the time he realized it, it was far too late. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who made Sunday breakfasts and folded laundry and tried so hard to keep the peace that she forgot to protect herself. That woman was soft, accommodating, afraid to make waves. She'd believed that love meant sacrifice, that marriage meant compromise, that being a good wife meant accepting less than she deserved. That woman would have forgiven Blake. She would have gone to counseling, would have tried to make it work, would have swallowed her pain and pretended everything was fine. That woman was gone. And I didn't miss her. The woman I'd become wasn't softer or kinder. She was sharper, clearer, stronger. She knew her worth and refused to settle for anything less. She'd learned that boring didn't mean weak. It meant underestimated, overlooked, dismissed. And there was power in that. Power in being the person no one sees coming. Power in being methodical and patient and precise. Blake called me boring because he thought it made me small. He didn't understand that boring women survive. Boring women plan. Boring women pay attention. And boring women make damn sure the people who hurt them never get the chance to do it again. He called me boring. And maybe I was. But I learned something Blake never did. Boring women survive. And we make damn sure they don't. If this story resonated with you, hit subscribe. There are more stories like this. Stories of women who were underestimated, betrayed, and dismissed. Women who fought back and won. You won't want to miss what comes next.